Frank Wilson addresses his future at LSU. You'll hear it next. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. And thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Frank Wilson met with reporters on Tuesday via Zoom to preview LSU's Texas Bowl matchup against the University of Houston. But as you might imagine, a lot of the conversation also migrated toward the current state of LSU football, namely Frank Wilson's feelings about Lane Kiffin, for whom he worked for a year at the University of Tennessee, how this transition has gone, and maybe most importantly to you watching this, what is Frank Wilson's future at LSU? And that's a question that Frank Wilson was asked. And it's been a very, I would say that Frank's future has been maybe the single most often asked question I've gotten from LSU fans. Like, will Frank be back on staff? And I haven't been able to give you a very direct answer, yes or no, because I believe it is very ambiguous at this point, which I want to get to in just a second. But first and foremost, Frank Wilson was asked that question, if he's had conversations with Lane Kiffin about his future on Lane Kiffin's staff.
Well, that isn't something that we've had conversations, and for me and for Coach Kiff, it's let's play this game on the 27th, and we'll go into those details later. We just want to finish what we've started with this football team, with the team of 2025. Give them our undivided attention before transition happens, and so. Until then, nothing will necessarily happen in that regard. There'll be opportunity there. Where that lies, I'm not sure. But the priority is our current football team.
I'm not a body language expert, but if you're watching, you just saw Frank Wilson on video answering that question. If you're listening, you could hear in the very nondescript, non-committal way he answered that question, where you can draw certain conclusions. If Lane Kiffin were bullish on retaining Frank Wilson, that would already be done. Lane Kiffin was bullish on returning Blake Baker, so much so that LSU is going to pay Blake Baker $3 million a year, potentially more with bonuses, and convinced Blake Baker not to take 2 head coaching jobs that were offered a week ago. That was a very obvious, direct, deliberate approach by the new staff to retain Blake Baker. It's pretty clear that same gusto doesn't exist with retaining Frank Wilson. Now, I want to be very clear because I always want to give you my opinion here. It's my job is to give you opinions. And sometimes you'll agree and sometimes you'll disagree, and that's fine. We can have civil discourse. We can agree and disagree, and that's fine. But I'm always going to give you an opinion. That's my job here. I want Frank Wilson on LSU staff, period. No qualifiers, nothing more. I want Frank Wilson on LSU staff. I see the immense value that he brings. When you look at the fact that when Brian Kelly was fired, not a single player opted out, not one. Why? Frank Wilson. He's the guy that recruited every guy on this roster, is great at building relationships. It's what's made him one of the best recruiters in this sport. Frank Wilson loves LSU. If you remember, if you're an everydayer, you'll remember this, but when Frank was introduced as the interim head coach, he was mimicking sirens from World War II at Pearl Harbor, talking about his love for LSU and representing the state of Louisiana. Through and through, he's exactly what you want. on this staff. And all of that, the most important part is that to be the LSU head football coach, you have got to recruit the city of New Orleans. Edna Carr just had 15 Division I signees. 15. One school, Edna Carr. 2 of them signing with LSU. The number 1 defensive tackle in the country, Richard Anderson, and 4-star safety, Aiden Hall. That's just one school. You have got to maintain incredible relationships with the high school fraternity or the fraternity of high school coaches in New Orleans. Frank Wilson was a New Orleans high school area football coach. He has relationships with all of those coaches. And as long as Frank Wilson is on staff, your foothold in New Orleans will be firm. That is important. That is a lesson Brian Kelly learned the hard way. Now, Brian Kelly, to his credit, hired Frank Wilson. But Brian Kelly let go Corey Raymond. He let go Blake Baker. He let Brian Polian serve as his recruiting coordinator year 1. Like, he made some mistakes. You retain Frank Wilson. You retain your roster. You maintain relationships in New Orleans. Incredible opportunities. You retain Frank Wilson. And on a personal level, I think Frank's awesome. Just as a man. Just as a human being that over many years of covering this team, from his first season coming to Baton Rouge in 2010 and having a conversation with him then, Frank relaying the conversation to his wife about the opportunity to, as he put it, come home and coach at LSU. Tears back in 2010 when he and his wife celebrated him coming to LSU. I mean, there's going to be nobody more passionate, more driven to make LSU successful. I want Frank Wilson on staff. I also don't get to make the decision. Lane Kiffin's the one that's going to make $90 million and has the autonomy to hire his staff. And Lane Kiffin wants Kevin Smith to come be his running backs coach. So this is the important thing to note from an LSU fan's perspective is, remember, and I've had so many people say, well, he could be the special teams coach or he could be the run game coordinator. You create a title. Remember, you have 10 full-time on-field assistants. That's all schools are allowed. Now, analysts can coach on the field and all that sort of stuff, but you have 10 full-time on-field assistants. And those assistants are the only ones that are allowed to recruit off campus. So that's critical when you're talking about the role Frank would play, because you want him to be able to recruit for you. I just told you, it's one of the key parts is having a foothold in New Orleans and allowing Frank to go recruit New Orleans for you. Well, remember, as you look at the defensive staff right now, Blake Baker, Corey Raymond, Jake Olson, Kevin Peoples, and then your defensive line coach, who would think is going to be Elijah Robbins. That's 5. Charlie Weiss, Joe Cox, George McDonald, Eric Wolford, your offensive line coach. That's 9. If Lane Kiffin brings Kevin Smith with him from Ole Miss, which it feels like is going to happen, you don't have another spot. You can go create an analyst spot, create a role, an off-field role for Frank. You can do that. I'm sure Lane Kiffin would be happy to do that. But for Frank Wilson, making $1 million a year as the associate head coach, running backs coach, and recruiting coordinator, would you take that type of demotion? It doesn't make a lick of sense. So I think the only opportunity you really have, it's pretty clear listening to Frank say it, the only opportunity you really have for Frank to be retained on the staff is if Kevin Smith decides he's staying at Ole Miss. And I'll say it again, I got nothing for Kevin Smith. Maybe a great guy, maybe a great coach. I don't care. If you give me the option at LSU, Frank Wilson, Kevin Smith, 100 times out of 100, the answer is Frank Wilson. But I don't get to make that decision. Lane Kiffin's going to make that decision. And it feels like he has. Because if the answer was Frank Wilson, that would already be determined. It would already be decided. And it hasn't been. And I think that's very telling. So really, I think the answer comes down to, is Kevin Smith going to stay at Ole Miss? And if he does, then I think Frank Wilson stays on staff. But if Kevin Smith does what I think he's going to do and come to Baton Rouge, then I don't think you have a spot. You don't have a spot on your full-time staff for Frank Wilson. And I hope that's not to the great detriment of the LSU football team. Now, there's also been the comments by many, and they're right. LSU won the national championship in 2003. Frank Wilson was not on staff. LSU won the national championship in 2007. Frank Wilson was not on staff. LSU won the championship in 2019. Frank Wilson was not on staff. He was on staff in 2011, and they got to the national championship game and lost, as we know. But I would also say that as the time has evolved, a different era of coach and coaches have come through New Orleans. And you're still going to get your fair share of players out of New Orleans regardless. But, I remember when Frank took the head coaching job at UTSA, and Les Miles knew he had to have an area presence in New Orleans. So he hired Jabbar Jalouk as his running backs coach. Well, after one season, Jabbar Jalouk was fired. And that's when Ed Orgeron was in his first year. And that went very badly. And Ed had to have a powwow at his office with the New Orleans area high school coaches to try to reestablish that relationship, ultimately doing so through a variety of coaching clinics and camps at LSU, and ultimately rebuilt that relationship. But it was not good. And I do wonder and worry early in his tenure if Lane Kiffin would be, I can't say burning a bridge, but damaging a bridge to the city of New Orleans if Frank isn't retained. It's a big story to watch, but you can tell just listening to Frank Wilson there, the answer is not emphatic that he'll be back. And in not being emphatic, it kind of tells you the answer at this point. So we'll wait until Ole Miss's college football playoff run is over. If at the end of that run, Kevin Smith decides to stay at Ole Miss, great. Then I think Lane Kiffin will have, or that Frank Wilson will have a spot on Lane Kiffin's staff. But if Kevin Smith decides that he's going to follow his friend Lane Kiffin to Baton Rouge after being with Kiffin for 3 years at FAU, 6 years at Ole Miss, 9 years together, and now an opportunity to come to the pinnacle of the sport, which I think he'll take, then Frank Wilson likely is not going to have a spot on Lane Kiffin's staff. We'll, of course, follow this over the next month or so. But in the meantime, Frank Wilson will keep coaching his football team toward the December 27th Texas Bowl against the University of Houston, which will be certainly Frank Wilson's final game as LSU's interim head coach. By the way, this was a Texas Bowl Zoom press conference that Frank held, where he did give some updates on LSU's preparations for the Texas Bowl. We'll fill you in on those details. When we come back, it's Locked On LSU, your team every day. The holidays come with two big goals: feeding people well and finding gifts they'll actually love. And when you want both handled in one move, Omaha Steaks is the way to go. From hosting to gifting, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your door. Because during their Sizzle All the Way sale, you can stock up and save in a huge way. 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. And it gets even better. Locked On College listeners get an extra $35 off with the code COLLEGE at checkout. I love how easy it is to gift. It shows up frozen, it's packaged beautifully, and it's ready to cook. The steaks are perfectly aged and insanely tender. It is restaurant level at home. Save big on gourmet gifts and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an extra $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, code COLLEGE. And today's show is also brought to you by Game Time, where we remind you the World Cup's coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track the price drops in real time. You can get alerts when great seats open, and you can buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. By the way, prices include the fees up front, which I love. So there's no last-second surprises at checkout. And alerts for teams and matches make it easy to grab tickets the moment they drop instead of missing out. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets. Every match, concert, event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, Game Time. Well, Frank Wilson, during that press conference, also updated his team's progress and preparation for the bowl game. So here on Tuesday, LSU will have its first team meeting in advance of the bowl game. And then Thursday, they'll hit the field for the first time. As of this very moment of recording, we do not yet have the practice schedule, but as we have that, we'll certainly let you know what the practice schedule and availability is. But as I often say, the biggest benefit of a bowl game, if you're not going to be in the playoff, is those 15 extra bowl practices and all the reps and experience. You get younger players doing those extra 15 practices and the opportunity to play another game. And, that's a big thing where you look at Notre Dame choosing not to play in a bowl game, Auburn choosing not to play in a bowl game. A lot of teams with turnover at head coach have chosen not to play in a bowl game. Well, LSU is going to play. And Frank Wilson explained why.
I think, it's important to finish what we've started, that the experience for the student athlete is the ultimate of what you're trying to accomplish. And to take that from these young men was something we never actually put on the table. It's something that they wanted. It's something that we as a university wanted to do, to complete a season and to send these seniors out the right way with an opportunity for victory as they conclude their careers here at LSU. That's a forever thing for us. And so I don't even know that there was discussion of not competing in a bowl game. It was never brought up to me. And so we're fortunate. We're excited about the opportunity to finish the season the right way.
I love it. I mean, we talked about Notre Dame's decision not to play. And, my feeling is I could certainly understand individuals. For example, Jaden Daniels wins the Heisman, and then LSU's playing in the Cheez-It Bowl against Wisconsin, and he chooses not to play. It's a smart decision. It's a prudent decision. It's a man who, in a couple of months' time, is going to make millions of dollars, and the last thing in the world you want to do is risk injury. I can understand individuals making that decision. Will Campbell, a year ago, didn't play in the Texas Bowl. He was the 4th overall pick of the draft. I get it. Preserve your health. Get ready for a life-altering moment that's coming a few months away. I just can't imagine, though, for the rest of your team not choosing to compete. Again, there's individuals who will make that decision, and I get it. But the opportunity to go compete and play a game and put on the uniform and represent your school or your family, I've told this story before, not necessarily here, but I can remember, again, I never played high-level sports. I played in high school. I had a few small school offers, but nothing important. But I remember being a kid, maybe 8, 9 years old, and playing baseball, and I would lay out my uniform on Friday night for the Saturday morning game, the jersey, the pants, the stirrups, the whole thing. I lay it out on the floor. And I remember there was a Saturday I woke up, it was raining, the phone rang, our coach called, said the game was canceled because of the rain. I started crying. I mean, it's just the opportunity. You only get so many opportunities in your life to compete. It's one of the reasons why in the Florida game, when Whit Weeks was ejected for targeting, I was so incensed by the ruling, because, man, you go through spring practice and fall camp and all of the heat and the throw up and the workouts and the everything to get the opportunity for those 12 games to compete in maybe the postseason. And then 3 plays in, one of those is ripped away from you because a guy crouched and you lowered in a non-malicious way. It's disgusting. I hate the rule because of that. But the point is, you stole an opportunity from a young guy to be able to go compete. And that's why I can't understand or ever imagine not playing in a game when you have the opportunity. So LSU is going to do it, but the LSU is going to be shorthanded. So in this press conference, Frank Wilson, he did acknowledge that Ahmad Bro, Kylan Billiot, Jelani Watkins, Ashton Stamps, Wallace Foster have all entered the portal. He did say, however, that Ahmad Bro, it looks like, has the possibility of playing in this game and then going into the portal. So it looks like you may have Bro in the game before he goes into the portal. Also, injuries. By the way, Jack Pyburn is one he mentioned may opt out of this game. Pyburn has already accepted an invitation to the Senior Bowl, so maybe Jack Pyburn chooses not to play. And then some pretty significant injuries. Garrett Nussmeier, Whit Weeks, Mansoor Delane, all out for the game. Aaron Anderson, questionable for the game. So Nuss, that means his career at LSU is over. And it's disappointing for all the reasons we've said. Would have loved to have seen him get healthy and have the opportunity to go spin it one more time for the Tigers. But you could certainly understand him looking ahead to the draft, getting healthy, getting ready for Pro Day, Combine, Senior Bowl, everything that may come for Garrett Nussmeier. But it means another great opportunity for Michael Van Buren to get another start under his belt as he started the last 3 games, and now an opportunity to get a 4th start here for the Tigers. Mansoor Delane, same thing. We've shared that with you. Had a brief conversation with Mansoor's father after the Western Kentucky game where Delane didn't play. Come to find out that abdominal injury he's dealt with, he had that since fall camp. So this All-American season that he had this year, he played this season with that abdominal injury that they managed medically. So the opportunity for Delane just to get healthy and get ready for Pro Day, Combine, all that stuff is probably the right decision. Whit Weeks is going to have a decision to make about returning. Frank was asked about that, said they have had those conversations, but no decision's been made. So it would stand to reason Whit has a great opportunity after really playing in just 5 games this year to come back, increase his draft stock, potentially help LSU to a championship. That would be amazing. And then Aaron Anderson, who at the time of his injury was LSU's leading receiver. Barian Brown, of course, now holds that distinction. But Anderson, multiple injuries, elbow, knee, torso, a lot of different things that he suffered, Ole Miss, and then carried forward for the duration of the season. But if Anderson isn't able to go, that just means more opportunity for some of those younger receivers. So we'll see how that all plays out. So Tigers will be shorthanded against Houston. No Garrett Nussmeier, no Mansoor Delane, no Whit Weeks, quite possibly no Aaron Anderson. Jack Pyburn could be opting out. So we'll follow it as it moves closer to December the 27th. But again, the benefit, by the way, Frank did say Braylon Moore has a chance to be ready to go. Moore was injured in the Western Kentucky game, but then did not play against Oklahoma. He'll have a chance to go in this bowl game, which may be a really good indicator that Moore could be back next season, which would be massive for LSU if they get another year out of Braylon Moore. So as the Tigers hit the practice field for the first time on Thursday, and as we have more media availability with Frank, we'll certainly keep you posted on everything building up to that December 27th Texas Bowl with LSU against Houston at NRG in Houston. Okay, that'll do it for us here on today's bonus episode of Locked on LSU. Do me a favor, please, if you're on a podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. Let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked on LSU. It's your team every day.